So with our handsome Mr. B, we're just going to warm up a little bit of some loose leash walking. So I know we've mentioned in the past, sometimes it can be really nice to warm up without your equipment on as well. So this way you can have one less thing to think about. I feel that for a lot of folks, and that's all right if he gets a little distracted, oh my gosh, chewing. For a lot of folks, I feel that equipment, you all right, can be one more thing to think about. And when you're first working on your mechanics, I find it can be really helpful to capture any moment your babe is in the right approximation to what you'd like for the future, and then build from there. So with Mr. B, if again we're practicing on both sides, that can be really helpful. Getting your dog comfortable on either the left or the right can be very nice for down the road. So right here, we're just going to go ahead and fade out, for example, using the food in the sense of being it right next to him and almost having him check in with that hand. I want to go from that to like having food on my stomach or by my back or in the pouch, and then capture these little great moments where he's still right by the side of my leg. So throughout this game, when you're working with some loose leash walking, I do find it can be helpful. Give little periods to have him disengage and then see if he can reorient back to you. I know we've been working on this a little bit with him too here, and then I'm not sure if he's also trying it sometimes in the yard. I do recommend sometimes to use a longer training leash. So that can be really helpful, especially if you're trying to also include, ready? We'll do a little find it. If you're trying to include a bit of exploration, ghost sniffing, and sort of normal dog behavior out in the world. But also it can be great for building up this ability to come back to you from distractions or to orient back to you maybe when they're further away, and do, again, a lovely recall exercise. Ready? Find it. So to keep him more engaged, just like most puppies, I try to rotate through several little skills and see how he's feeling. He and Mr. Bernie had some wrestles earlier, so he's a little bit tired. He's still panting from it. Bodie, here. So then the benefit of, again, doing those lovely little find its is then you can work this little recall moment from him, and that was really pretty. Ready? So if we're going to start, oh my goodness, chew them. Chewing is still something we're practicing. All right. So we're going to keep him moving, take a few lovely steps, and make sure he's, again, somewhat nearby. You can get as fancy as you'd like for down the road, like if you really wanted to get more into like heel work or go and do some other types of dog sports. But truthfully, for the pet dog family, no big deal if your loose leash walking is nice and soft, and you don't have to, for example, always have those eyes on you, right? We might gain that little sit, and then yes, to feed the handsome guy. Two, if you're finding he's not as responsive, sometimes when you fade out the lure, ready, down. Yes. You may want to gauge what is the environment like. So if you're finding that he's not as responsive, so right now we're just doing a couple puppy push-ups. Ready? So I might do my little stand or up. If he's a little bit unsure, you can have moments where maybe he's pooped out. Maybe he doesn't understand the setup because of the environment around him. I know we went on our field trip together, stand, yes. And we went and practiced at Tractor Supply. So it can be nice to do adventures with your pups and even sometimes your adult dogs. But I would recommend, remember to, when we're practicing, keep it short and sweet. Make sure that we're not flooding him or others with setups that are way past their comfort range or understanding. So there's this concept that your dog is going to somehow get better the more they get exposed to something, but it depends on what kind of response you're getting while they're being exposed. So if, let's say, for example, with Miss J, let's say every time she goes for a walk and we're trying to get her more comfortable on that walk, but she keeps getting triggered and has moments where she doesn't do so well, more of what she's practicing is the behavior we don't want her to rehearse and get good at. So a lot of times this concept of just kind of keep doing it until they finally don't mind it is not really going to work. And this is where typically for dogs that are having difficulty with over exuberance, oh my gosh, chewing, with over exuberance, like they get eager beaver, they see something, they lose their marbles, and then eventually they continue on their merry way, is because the dog's emotional response still has never really been worked on. But then also what I mean by that is if your babe, for example, is able to always go to the real world setup and they're struggling, the more they rehearse those struggle moments, the more that becomes part of the full exposure and experience. So working with a softer environment and showing them what to do instead while maybe slowly increasing difficulty off in the distance is more what's called counter conditioning. So we want to stay away from flooding, which is how some folks will try to expose their dogs to things. And flooding doesn't actually make your dog get better. It tends to normally either have them shut down or the behaviors keep escalating. So we do want to be careful with how we're exposing our puppies or dogs to stimulus. Bodie, here. Yes, what a good boy. So we're going to maybe do a couple more little puppy push-ups if he's interested. So ready? For these lovely puppy push-ups, so these are working your sits, working sometimes your down or, for example, your stand or up position. If he's ever a little uncertain because the environment has become too stimulating, you could ask him stand, nice job, for a behavior that might be easier for him or move to a softer venue. He did really nicely when he was at Tractor Supply. There were some times where certain things either distracted him, which is super normal, or there was, again, some of that novelty where he would see something or someone off in the distance and be a little bit unsure. So don't worry if your dogs, again, try to communicate in the only way they can, which is through normal dog vocalizations, there we go, or through body language. So if we're not able to perceive what is our dog saying at a whisper, how are we possibly going to help them get better if we miss out on the small moments where they're feeling a little bit unsure? And we keep going further, you're going to get those, oh, well, it came out of nowhere, or all of a sudden it just became really big behavior responses. So with Mr. B, we'll do another little Bodie here. Yes, what a good boy. Slowly making his way on down. Good job. So when working through any behavior, be it puppy push-ups to working loose leash walking to working recalls, I would recommend that you start to include sometimes a visual, so like a hand signal. And for example, also start preemptively asking too with the word. So if let's say we were going to go ahead and see if we can get a little sit. If let's say beautiful, he responds to the verbal cue, that's much more advanced than, for example, only visual. I find for a lot of the dogs, since they're visual learners, it can be really nice to have a hand signal too. So if let's say we were going to work a down, for his, it tends to be like a hand motion towards the floor. Other folks might choose different hand signals. Truthfully, it's whatever seems to make sense for you and your household. So I have faded out the lure whenever possible where my hand is not full of a goodie. I'm going to ask him for a stand and he's like, lady, I finally just lied down. He's exhausted. So if there's moments where your babes don't do the behavior, don't keep asking if you know they're not going to do hot with it. Otherwise, you might lose out on the whole meaning behind the word. Your puppy might get confused. There's a lot of moments where people say, well, the dog, every time I say something, they don't respond, or they used to and now they don't. Part of it can be either one, they don't fully understand the behavior or the skill. Two, the environment plays a big role in their comfort range or their ability to focus. And the third one would be is have our moments with our puppies created good learning history or sometimes confusion or even negative associations. So sometimes when you're, agitated or overwhelmed, I'm not saying this is what you guys do, there could be moments where out of frustration, we yank on the puppy and tell them to go into a sit. So sometimes then if sits are paired with the negative or conflict or the bringer of the bad, then sitting starts to happen less readily because the dog's afraid it's going to cause another outburst from our end. So if let's say he doesn't get into a stand or an up, I could go back to luring if he's still working on the stand or up and it's not quite as refined. Remember that there's going to be a lot of times where the advanced skills are, again, basics that have been finely tuned and mastered. So again, we're going to see if we can get Mr. B. Ready? We'll do a little stand. Yes. So sometimes it could have been he was a little tired and he had to get up and kind of in a moment once he was rested. Ready? So if, again, we're going to rock some of these puppy push-ups, we might, again, start with our sit since that's the most, he says, how about my beautiful singing voice? If you, for example, get some woo-woos out of him, there will be times, so right here, I'm going to feed him when he's nice and quiet. there are going to be moments where your puppies might add in vocalizations, either because they're overexcited, they're confused, ready down, they're really sort of stimulated by here comes food. So if you're finding that your babe is sometimes barking, some folks don't care, which is fine. Others don't love it if barking becomes part of the skill. So what I mean by that is some folks have asked for an eye contact behavior, be it a look or watch me, and in the same time the puppy has barked and then they fed for the eye contact. But what happens there sometimes is the puppy thinks the full behavior might be sitting, eye contact, and the wooing. So the barking is what also gave them the bonus bit. So there could be times where at times we may, with our timing or what he's putting together, what could create like a behavior sequence, and it can get a little confusing from his end. So I would recommend that if he does go into some barking, give him a moment or try to redirect him to something better. But if he's barking a lot through the training, gauge, am I maybe making this too difficult? Could he maybe need another way to expend some energy first and then work a little bit through the mental and physical practice? So again, we're going to do a little find it just to get him up and wiggling. If he enjoys movement through these find its, you may find that to be a great way to reboot and then sort of reset him physically and mentally, ready, to work right there. Yes. Sorry, seltzer. So again, we're going to do another little find it. Oh, he says, lady, I didn't see where that one went. We'll try over here so we can see it a little bit better. He says, maybe I'll go explore the whole room. Bodie, here. So don't worry. If he lost his little find it, he'll find it eventually. Good job. Nice. You can see he's meandering over, so his speed is a little bit softer once he's also expended a little bit of energy, which is fine. I don't think he's ever going to be a super fast man all the time. Yes. So there could be moments where you could capture behavior. So remember, like a photograph, or you could work on, for example, shaping to a skill. So shaping, again, just to reiterate, is where, let's say your dog doesn't quite know what to do, but you're feeding or reinforcing or giving him information as to like when he's doing the little beginning stages of something that is in the right direction. Kind of like warm versus cold. Like you'd be like warm, warmer, warmer, hot, super hot, on fire. So eventually you tend to feed for just the full behavior. So if, let's say, our down was what we were looking for, but we were shaping to it, we may find that sometimes some dogs do like downward facing dog where their caboose might be up, but their front end might be down. If we don't feed for the sort of glimmers of the behavior, your babe may find it all too challenging or too frustrating and not bother, participating. So I find it can be really nice to feed for the almost there. So I'm going to see if we can work a little bit with our stay, even without a target. So remember, stays can happen anywhere. So you do not have to go out and bring a dog bed or a blanket or a cot to the middle of the woods to work a stay behavior out there. I do find that working stay and then implementing it into a place behavior can be nice for households or traveling or giving a target to go hone in on. So, but let's say Mr. Handsome got up. I'm going to ask him for his down. He's like, this is so exhausting. And I'm going to go ahead and feed him for that lovely placement. So I'm going to tell him to stay, and I'm going to see if I can add a little bit of movement just while he's kind of hanging out right here for a second. So when starting to work on any of these little skills, remember, like with the stay, like we've discussed a little bit prior, is we're building value in not moving, which again, for most puppies, they find this to be really silly. Even some adult dogs will have a challenging moment holding still. So I find it can be really beneficial to start implementing this in little bits throughout different sections of your home, so you can start to help your puppy sometimes take a break. Remember that being stationary, though, for some dogs can start to increase anxiety or frustration or big emotions. So we wouldn't want to place our puppy in a scenario where, let's say he's at Tractor Supply and he's practicing with you guys, and all of a sudden he hears like maybe the forklift or a funny noise. If he breaks from his stay and then gets reprimanded for breaking, and then you force him back into it, at that point, now stay has become rather negative, where he is really flustered and wants to escape that situation. Remember that you should never again get agitated or overwhelmed yourselves if your dog is showing signs that they're feeling flustered too. So remember, fear is an involuntary response. So it's your fight or flight comes in. if we're trying to train through fight or flight, you're more than likely creating what's called more negative association, but also you might be losing out on the positive associations with that environment, with you, with your food, with the skill, be it a down or a stay. So we want to be really careful that we're not, again, flooding, like I mentioned a little bit earlier. So right now, Mr. B has been doing a really nice job. If, for example, he was feeling comfortable, sure, you could try working a little bit with some relaxation or vegging in a spot. But I would keep an eye as to what his body language is looking like. What are his responses? Is he still taking food? If some of those were getting a little bit not so good, then that might be the only way your puppy says, you know what, I'm having a hard time. I'm not feeling safe, and this is too overwhelming. And typically disobedience is either your dog not understanding something, because again, they're dogs, they don't speak English, and they don't really see the value in most of the stuff we do. So if he's not doing very well, it's more than likely the environment is too stimulating or too overwhelming. The dog may not understand the concept, or it also hasn't been generalized. So I know we dive into like the generalization and how important that is, but for a lot of folks, they don't realize just how much practice goes into some of the behaviors that they see with other dogs working certain skills. So you kind of see like the very fast after effect or behaviors, but you don't see all the hard work that went into that skill. So Mr. B is doing a great job. So let's say I'm going to end this gorgeous stay. I'm going to feed him his last little morsel for being in this down stay. And then I'm going to go back to him and release him by either saying his, all done, finished, release. So I'm going to go ahead, pat this handsome monkey. I know I've mentioned it a little bit in a previous video too, is when you add touch, if they don't love touch, don't bother. So remember, just like with certain people, some folks don't like hugs. Some people don't want to go up on stage and talk in front of a crowd. So you're going to have different likes and dislikes or comfort ranges. And this is why when you're working with your particular babe, he might have certain comfort ranges and Miss J has certain ones, and then your other boy at home has others. So which is all perfectly fine. So again, we might get him up. He's like, lady, I am pooped. If he's really stuck, which sometimes Mr. B, I know he really enjoys his downstays, because I too would love to be a prince or princess, for example, rocking a place behavior and being fed. So I'm going to see if I can get him up. So typically, nice. So if I got him up, I'm going to reinforce for a little sitting position versus the breaking from the stay. So I typically, unless it was like really challenging for the puppy and they were really having a hard time, I could technically do an all done and they're finished and they're not being fed from there and they're going to be getting up, and then we might do a find it potentially to get them up just in the beginning. So for some dogs, it helps to break from a position with some movement. But typically I want them to think the best part of being stuck in a stay is that the reinforcement comes for being stationary. So I'm going to try another stay while he's maybe sitting and see if the sit stay could maybe be just as potentially beneficial for him or comfortable as that down stay. So again, I'm going to go back and feed this handsome guy for that beautiful response. So if your baby were to get up and break, remember that could be them saying, not feeling it, or I just don't understand. So this is where dogs are amoral. So we really don't want to start getting agitated or grumpy at them. Doesn't mean we as people don't have moments where we can lose our temper. I mean, we're all alive and have emotions too that we're working through. But remember, your puppy won't understand you're mad because of what they just did. They're going to think you're just agitated with them. So if, let's say, I got mad at him for getting up, there's plenty of times where getting up is perfectly okay. He's like, lady, I'm starving. So there's plenty of times, and there's that woo-woo that I'm going to ignore. And not ignore, and what I mean by ignore is let it keep happening. So again, stay. But if, let's say, he's like, no, it's really hard. So notice how sometimes there can be moments, and jumping again is your puppy maybe saying, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed or don't quite understand. So again, stay. So this time I'm not going to leave him. I'm going to stay nearby, but I'm not going to feed during the woo-woo. If your puppy is just an eager beaver for food, I would recommend to start sometimes practicing working through some of this excitement, which again is still normal and okay. But make sure we're capturing moments throughout his practice where he is quiet and then being fed throughout some of those skills. We may find maybe he needs some movement, or maybe he needs more relaxation so his brain can kind of connect back with his body. Good job. But back to, like, since puppies are amoral, if we were to get mad at him for getting up, remember that getting up is part of the release for all done. So why is it one moment we're happy with him moving and the next moment not? So from their perspective, we are just unpredictable. And that unpredictability actually leads to more of a relationship breakdown, more anxiety, and then potentially more behavioral problems. So this is really pretty now. So notice how I shortened or like made my criteria easier for him, and my distance is much closer. There's going to be moments where, if let's say you're trying to work a sit stay versus a down stay, maybe one of them he's better at than the other. So we may find making the setup softer for him means more success for everybody. So we might go, again, all done, and then we'll see if we can get Mr. Handsome up and wiggling. Good job. What a smart man. He's like, this is exhausting, crazy lady. Nice. So we'll capture another couple little moments. So I know we were discussing too earlier, there's luring your puppy with food, but you want to fade out the lure. And then, for example, there is that capturing of behavior. So let's say, for example, we were trying to capture moments where he was like by my leg. So I'm going to send him away so we can practice. So capturing would be when he on his own potentially offers a behavior that you're looking for, like right here, yes. So I would capture the moment Mr. B is next to my leg. Obviously, there's going to be times where you might lure, which is kind of one of the fastest ways, so using the food to create behavior. But then we do want to get that out of range, right? Oh, chew them, sir. But we want to fade out the lure as quickly as we can, because if the lure always stays there, the puppy perceives it again. The sentence is like, let's say, for example, present the food, do the skill, and then get the reinforcement. We want him to go from food being presented first to do the skill, then get the reinforcement. So the food is not the precursor to the behavior, but it's the reinforcement for the behavior or the skill or whatever you're working on. So we're just doing a couple little find its again. See if he heads back. Ready? Bodie, here. We'll just work a little recall. He's like, oh my gosh. Yes, good job. I know you guys have also been doing a great job marking behavior. So markers can be very helpful for either play reinforcement or toy reinforcement, or for example, also working like food reinforcements. So when I normally say my YES, it means that your paycheck in the form of food is coming for that thing you just did. So some people also use a clicker, perfectly fine. Some people use their mouth, where they might make a noise like a click. So marking behavior, though, is a great way to let your puppy learn a little bit faster the reason behind the reinforcement. So ready, Bodie? He's like, hold up, I smell something amazing. So if I don't get him, I was just quickly seeing if I could get his attention. Oh, we had to go to the restroom. Shucks. He's been tanking up on some water. So remember, don't view this as like a house training issue. I know a lot of folks like get horrified when their dogs go to the restroom in here. Obviously, I don't love that I have to clean up all the time here and there, but it's okay. So remember that this was a doggy daycare for 10 years before I moved in. So even though I've done my darnest to sanitize, which it is clean, the thing is the residual odor that smells like a restroom or a place to communicate to other dogs who they are and what they're up to, ready, is still very much so alive here. So remember that going to the restroom, which is again another cultural difference for both of us, is going to the restroom for them is a form of communication, gives them information about who the other dog is, gets them to know, their sex, their health, all these different things. And obviously for us, we hopefully use the restroom, wash our hands, and then we're done. So communication from our perspective, not so much. From theirs, a lot. So ready, Bodie, here. So you're going to have moments where culturally what dogs do may seem weird to us, like sniffing body parts or licking certain places or whatever. So this is where dogs are dogs and people are people, but this doesn't mean that your dog does not feel emotions. For example, like us, where they could be sad or scared or really happy or, really stressed out. So this concept that your puppy is like a little robot that you just tell them what to do and they have to do it kind of sets everybody up for failure. Ready? So we'll get another little sit. Yes, what a smart boy. So maybe what we'll do is we'll give Mr. B a little break, send him out for a little potty break with me. Oh, chew them, sir. Chewing is still so hard. And then what we'll do is we'll maybe bring out his sister and we'll do a little practice again together. And then we'll work a little bit with Miss J as well without her little brother. And then that way they can, again, still get all their fun practice in. So, but we'll give Mr. B a little breather. Here, you want to do a little find it? But he did a really nice job with some of his practice again today.